It was a normal Friday afternoon. I had just finished my last class for the week, and I was feeling excited about a quiet weekend alone in the woods. I'm 22, just out of college, and I thought a little time away from the city would do me good. Nothing was out of the ordinary. The drive up to the cabin was peaceful, the kind of road trip where the only sounds are the hum of tires on asphalt and the occasional call of a bird. The cabin itself looked normal. Small, wooden, tucked between pine trees, sitting just far enough from the road that it felt isolated but not unreachable. I had booked it weeks ago through a rental site, purely for solitude and the chance to read, hike, and disconnect from everything. Everything about it seemed calm, safe, and normal. I remember thinking how quiet it was as I pulled into the gravel driveway. The trees swayed gently in the wind, and the last rays of the sun filtered through the branches. I unpacked my bag, carried it inside, and set it on the kitchen counter. The place smelled faintly of wood polish and the lingering scent of someone else's weekend, long before me. It felt empty, but in a comforting way, like it had been waiting for me. I set down my keys and started making some tea, glancing out the window at the edge of the forest. That's when I noticed it, something I can't explain even now. There was a branch, or so I thought at first, tapping lightly against the glass. But the sound didn't match the wind. It was soft, deliberate, like a finger drumming, not a branch swaying. I froze. I walked closer to the window. Nothing. The wind was still, the trees didn't move, and the cabin remained silent except for the faint creak of the roof settling. I laughed at myself, convinced it was my imagination, the kind of thing that happens when you're alone in a quiet place. But the feeling stayed. A prickling at the back of my neck, a subtle warning I couldn't shake. Something about the way the sound had come, precise and timed. I moved back into the kitchen and tried to focus on making my tea. I told myself it was nothing. A loose branch. A trick of the wind. I kept glancing toward the window, but everything was normal. Still, there was a sense that I wasn't alone. I couldn't see anyone, but I could feel a presence, something just beyond the edge of vision. It didn't move, didn't speak, didn't reveal itself, but it was there. That's when I realized the cabin door, which I had locked earlier, wasn't latched properly. Just a little ajar. I hadn't touched it since I walked in. My hands trembled slightly as I pushed it closed again, and that's when I heard the knock, a single, quiet tap at the window. Nothing else. Just that soft, deliberate sound. And in that instant, I knew this weekend would not be quiet at all. After the initial shock at the window, I tried to calm myself. The cabin was quiet again, and I told myself I was imagining things. The place itself was nothing extraordinary, just a small, single-story wooden cabin with a sloped roof and a little porch overlooking the forest. Inside, it was simple but comfortable. There was a kitchenette with a small stove, a fridge, and a sink that had seen better days. A wooden table sat in the center of the room with 2 chairs, and a worn couch rested against one wall. The bedroom was just through a narrow hallway, with a bed neatly made and a small lamp on the nightstand. Nothing unusual. Nothing that suggested anything could go wrong. It was early evening, around 7 p.m., and the sun had already begun to sink behind the tall pines. The forest around the cabin was quiet, almost unnaturally so. Usually, even in the evening, you'd hear crickets or the occasional bird settling in for the night. But here, it was silent aside from the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. That stillness was peaceful at first, but after a while, it started to feel like something was missing, like the normal sounds of nature had vanished. I had come here for a weekend getaway, purely to be alone. After months of studying and part-time work, I wanted some time to clear my head. No phone calls, no emails, no responsibilities, just me, the cabin, and the forest. My plan was simple: unpack, make dinner, sit by the window with a cup of tea, read a book, and maybe take a short hike along the trail behind the cabin before bed. The rental listing had made it sound perfect, and at first glance, it was exactly what I was expecting. I wasn't entirely alone in the area. The cabin was part of a small cluster along the same dirt road, and I knew from the listing that a couple of other cabins were within a mile or two. But they were far enough that it felt private. The nearest neighbor wouldn't even see me if I waved from the porch. That sense of isolation was exactly why I picked this place. For a moment, I felt a strange comfort in the quiet, even after the knocking incident. I started unpacking my bag. Inside were a few clothes, a notebook, and a flashlight. I put my phone on the table, even though I knew the signal here was weak. I told myself it was fine, I didn't need anyone. The cabin smelled faintly of wood smoke and cleaning products, the way older cabins often do. I opened a window slightly to let in the cool evening air. The breeze carried the scent of pine and earth, and for a while, I let myself just breathe and relax. I made some tea and carried it to the couch, setting the cup on the table. The forest outside looked calm, bathed in the golden light of the fading sun. Shadows stretched long between the trees, but they didn't worry me yet. At that moment, nothing seemed out of place. Nothing screamed danger. Just a quiet cabin, a soft breeze, and the feeling that I had finally gotten some time to myself. Exactly what I had come here for. I had no idea that the night was only just beginning. After settling in with my tea, I tried to lose myself in the book I had brought. The cabin felt quiet again, the kind of quiet you notice only when it's too quiet. I told myself I was overthinking the earlier knock on the window. Maybe a branch had tapped it. Maybe the wind had shifted oddly. Nothing more. But even as I tried to focus, a small part of me couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I set my cup down and glanced out the window. The sun had fully disappeared, leaving long shadows stretching between the trees. The forest looked normal, just like it had all day. Yet there was a subtle movement at the edge of my vision. A dark shape slipped behind a tree. I shook my head. It was probably just a deer or a stray bird. The shadows here were deep, and it was easy for anything to vanish quickly. As I tried to read, I started hearing faint noises from outside the cabin. At first, it was just a snapping of twigs, nothing unusual for a forest. But the sounds weren't random. They were slow, deliberate, almost like footsteps pacing just beyond the treeline. I froze and listened. The rustling stopped. Then, a soft thump against the side of the cabin made me jump. My heart rate sped up, but when I looked, the porch was empty. I tried to calm myself again, thinking logically. Maybe a branch had fallen. Maybe an animal was curious about the cabin. But then I noticed another small thing. The door latch I had carefully closed earlier seemed slightly off. The door was still closed, but the latch didn't feel as tight as it should. I hadn't touched it since I got in. The cabin, which had seemed so safe before, suddenly felt exposed. I moved closer to the window, looking out into the dark forest, straining to see any movement. Shadows stretched in strange directions, cast by the weak light of my lamp inside. The wind rustled the branches, but the sound of it seemed heavier now, closer somehow. My mind tried to reason it away, but my instincts told me to be alert. Then came the faintest whisper of sound, a soft exhale, like someone breathing. I turned sharply toward the hallway, expecting maybe a family of squirrels or a raccoon had come inside. Nothing. The cabin was empty, but the sound had been real. Slow, low, deliberate, almost like someone was hiding just out of sight. I grabbed my flashlight from the counter, shining it across the room. The beam fell on the hallway, the bed, the couch. Nothing unusual. Yet every time I swung it toward the windows, I thought I saw something move, a quick shadow vanishing behind a tree or the edge of the cabin. My stomach tightened. My rational mind told me it was nothing. My gut said something wasn't right. For the first time, the isolation of the cabin didn't feel like freedom. It felt like vulnerability. Every creak, every rustle, every soft thump against the walls made me flinch. The forest, once peaceful, seemed alive in a way I couldn't explain. Something was out there, and I had no idea what it was, or if it was watching me already. By the time darkness fully settled over the forest, I was on edge. Every sound seemed sharper, every shadow deeper. The cabin, which had felt peaceful just hours ago, now felt like a trap. The soft rustling of leaves outside was constant, almost rhythmic, as if someone or something was pacing near the tree line. I kept the flashlight in my hand, shining it across the windows, across the porch, but I saw nothing solid. Then came the first unmistakable sign. The latch on the cabin door clicked. I hadn't touched it. I froze, holding my breath, listening. Another click followed, slightly louder. It sounded deliberate, like someone was testing the door, pressing against it, making sure it could open. I backed away slowly, my hands trembling, my mind racing for a logical explanation. But there was none. The wind had picked up outside, making the pine trees sway and the roof creak. Normally, I would have ignored it. But now, every creak sounded intentional. Every shadow seemed to shift unnaturally. I thought I heard a soft footstep on the porch, just beyond the reach of a light. I froze again, straining to hear, heart hammering. It stopped as suddenly as it had started, leaving an eerie silence behind. I tried calling my friend, who lived a few miles away, but my phone barely had a signal. The battery was low. The thought of being completely alone hit me in a way it hadn't before. I felt trapped. This cabin, which had been my escape, now felt like a cage. I could imagine someone outside, waiting, watching, knowing I was alone. Then I saw it, a faint silhouette just past the edge of the porch light. At first, I thought it was a trick of the shadows. But it stayed there. A human shape, crouched low, barely moving, staring in my direction. My stomach dropped. I could see the outline of a head, shoulders, and the way it held itself, still, but alert. Someone was out there. I wanted to run, but I didn't know where. The windows looked like potential escape routes, but he was outside, moving silently, possibly circling the cabin. Every instinct told me to stay quiet, to make no sudden movements. My flashlight trembled in my hands as I shone it toward the figure. The beam caught a glimpse of dark clothing, blending almost perfectly with the shadows. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He just watched. A sudden noise inside the cabin made me jump. The fridge door rattled as if pushed. I knew I hadn't touched it. My mind raced. Maybe he had entered. Maybe he was inside. Panic surged, but I tried to keep calm. I grabbed a kitchen knife, holding it tight, my only reassurance that I had a chance if he came through the door. The silhouette moved again, closer this time, creeping along the edge of the porch. The way he moved was slow, deliberate, like a predator testing its prey. I pressed myself against the far wall, barely breathing, every muscle tense. He was here. He was real. And he was closer than I could have imagined. I didn't have much time to think. 1 second, the silhouette was at the edge of the porch. The next, I heard a low, deliberate knock on the cabin door. Hard this time, like someone testing its strength. My heart slammed in my chest. I knew he was real, and he was trying to get in. I backed away from the windows and grabbed my flashlight and the kitchen knife. My hands shook so badly, I could barely hold them steady. The sound of the porch floorboards creaking under his weight made it clear he was moving closer, circling the cabin, searching for a way in. I tried to calm my breathing, but every instinct screamed at me to run. Suddenly, I heard the doorknob jiggle. Someone was trying to open it. Panic hit me fully. I had to move before he got in. I looked around for an escape. The windows were too small to climb through quickly, and the back door led to the same dark forest where he was waiting. My only choice was the front door, hoping to get to my car before he blocked me. I swung the door open and ran. My flashlight bounced across the ground, revealing nothing but trees and shadows. I could hear him behind me, moving faster now, branches snapping under his weight. The sound of footsteps pounding the forest floor mixed with my own heavy breathing. I didn't dare look back. I made it to my car, fumbling with the keys. The keychain slipped from my fingers once, twice. My hands were slick with sweat. Finally, I managed to unlock the door, yanked it open, and jumped inside. I slammed the locks and started the engine. The tires crunched over the gravel driveway, and I could hear him stop at the edge of the trees. For a few terrifying seconds, everything was quiet. I dared to glance in the rearview mirror. A dark figure crouched just past the tree-line, watching. He didn't move, didn't chase, but he was still there. My stomach twisted. I didn't know if he was waiting for me to come back or if he had been following me the whole time. I floored the accelerator and drove as fast as I could toward the main road, lights cutting through the night. The forest passed in a blur, but I kept thinking I could still see him in the shadows, just standing, waiting for another chance. I called the police as soon as I had signal, telling them what had happened. They said a man had been reported lurking around cabins in the area, sometimes following renters and testing doors. No one knew his identity. No one had caught him. I didn't stop driving until I reached a gas station 10 miles away. My hands were shaking so badly, I couldn't hold the phone steady. The attendant looked at me like I had seen a ghost when I told him what happened. The police said they would send someone out to check the cabin, but by then I didn't care. I just needed to be anywhere but there. Even now, I can remember how fast my heart was beating, the sound of every footstep, every branch snapping behind me. That night, I learned how quickly normal can turn into danger, and how small and powerless you feel when someone is out there, watching, waiting, and moving closer. After I finally reached the gas station and called the police, I thought the worst was over. My hands were still shaking, and my stomach felt like it had dropped into my chest. The officer on the phone reassured me that someone would check the cabin, that they had reports of a man lurking in the area, and that I should stay where it was safe. I nodded, but something in my gut told me there was more to this than just a random intruder. Later, when the police arrived at the cabin, I decided to follow them, partly out of curiosity and partly because I couldn't sleep without knowing what had really happened. I drove slowly behind their vehicle, the headlights cutting through the darkness of the forest road. When we arrived, the cabin was quiet again. Nothing moved. The officers went inside, searching the rooms and checking the windows, the porch, and the surrounding woods. That's when one of them called me over. I walked toward him, trying to keep calm, thinking maybe they had found something. But the look on his face made my stomach drop. "You need to see this," he said. He led me to the back of the cabin, where the floorboards had been carefully pried up. Beneath them, there was a small, dugout space, just big enough for someone to crawl inside and hide. My mind went blank. That's where he had been. That's where he had watched me from, under the floor, while I thought I was alone. The officer pointed to faint footprints and pieces of discarded clothing. "He's been here a long time," he said quietly. "Hiding, waiting, watching." I couldn't believe it. All the noises I had heard, the soft footsteps, the clicking of the latch, the low rustle of movement in the shadows, they had come from someone inside the cabin itself. Not outside. Not just circling it. He had been living there in secret, probably for weeks, maybe months. And I had walked into his space without knowing it. The officers told me that the previous cabin renters had reported similar experiences, strange sounds, missing items, the feeling of being watched. No one had been able to catch him, and it seemed he had perfected the art of hiding. My encounter was just the latest in a series of terrifying incidents that no one could explain. I tried to process it all as I drove home later that night. The man I thought had been stalking me outside, who had seemed like a shadow in the forest, had actually been under the floor the whole time. Every step I thought I heard in the woods, every shadow at the window, every small sound inside the cabin, it was him. Watching, waiting, knowing exactly where I was. The realization hit me hard. I had never felt more exposed, more powerless. The danger hadn't been at the edge of the forest. It had been inside my supposed safe place, closer than I could have imagined. And the worst part? No one knew who he was, where he came from, or if he would ever strike again. That night, I understood something I'll never forget. Sometimes, the scariest person isn't the one in the shadows outside. It's the one hiding where you think you're safest. Even after that night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed at a motel nearby, lights on, doors locked, double-checking every window. The police assured me the cabin was being monitored, that officers would patrol the area, and that I should stay somewhere safe for a while. I wanted to believe them, but something deep inside told me it wasn't over. I kept thinking about the space under the floorboards. How long had he been there? How many people had he watched without anyone noticing? The thought made my stomach twist. Every sound I had dismissed as wind, every shadow that flickered across the window, Every creak of the floor. It wasn't random. It was intentional. It was him. And I had never even seen his face. I tried to distract myself, but the memory followed me everywhere. At the gas station, I kept glancing at the tree line, imagining a figure crouched just beyond the shadows. On the drive home, I felt eyes on me, though I knew I was alone. I stopped at a diner to eat, but every time the door opened, I flinched, expecting him to step inside. No one did. Yet the fear lingered, heavy and unshakable. I thought I had escaped, but the realization that he had been inside the cabin, closer than I ever imagined, made me question everything. Could he still be out there, watching someone else? Waiting for the next person to arrive? The thought made me shiver. No one knew who he was. No one knew where he came from, and the report suggested he had been active in that area for months. How many times had he slipped under the radar? How many people had been in his space without realizing it? Sometimes, late at night, I dream about the cabin. I see the floorboards lifted, the narrow space hidden beneath, and I imagine someone crouched there, watching silently. I wake up sweating, heart racing, convinced for a moment that he's there again. I know it's just a dream, but the fear feels real, like a shadow that won't leave me. I went back to the cabin once during the day with the police just to see it. Everything looked normal in the sunlight. The forest seemed calm, the trees still, the air fresh. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something unseen lingered in the corners, in the shadows, just out of sight. Even empty, even quiet, the place felt alive with a presence I could not explain. The last thing the officers told me shook me more than anything else. They said he had never been caught, that they had no idea if he was still in the area. The cabin would be locked and checked regularly, but no one could guarantee safety. And that's the worst part, knowing that someone somewhere might still be out there, watching, waiting. Sometimes, I feel it when I'm alone at home. A brush of movement in the corner of my eye. A creak from the floor. A shadow shifting too quickly to be explained. I tell myself it's paranoia, but I never check. I never look. Because if he's still out there, watching, I don't want him to know I saw him. I still don't know who he was. I don't know where he came from, or if he's gone for good. And the thought that the next person who rents that cabin, or any cabin like it, might walk into the same nightmare is impossible to ignore. Some things I've learned are never meant to be solved.